The stench of the cannery clung to Clara's dress, a sour, metallic scent that never truly left her, no matter how much water she drew from the creek to splash over her face. She was 12, though her small frame and hollowed eyes made her seem younger, a sparrow caught in a tangle of barbed wire. Her father, a man whose kindness had evaporated with the Texas heat and the endless debts, stood beside her. His face, usually a mask of weary resignation, held a strange mixture of shame and desperate relief as the rancher, a tall, quiet man named Elias Vance, counted out $60 in worn bills. Clara felt the familiar ache of abandonment settle deep in her bones, a cold stone growing heavier with each passing moment. She was a commodity, no different from the scrawny chicken scratching in the dust or the worn-out tools in her father's shed. Her breath hitched in her throat, a tiny gasp she swallowed before it could become a sob. She didn't look back at her father, couldn't bear the sight of him. The dust on the road seemed to blur, and for a second, the world tilted. This was it then. Another hand, another burden, another set of eyes to meet with practiced indifference. Before we get into this tale, let us know in the comments. Where are you watching from? And subscribe if you want more content like this one. Elias Vance's voice was low, raspy, like creek stones tumbling over each other. "Girl," he'd said, his gaze steady, not unkind. "You ain't cattle. Will you come with me?" It wasn't a question of agreement. Not truly. It was a question of dignity, a flicker of something she hadn't encountered in years. Clara had simply nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Her silence was her shield, her only defense against a world that always took, never offered. The long ride in Elias's wagon was mostly silent, the only sounds the creak of the wheels and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. Elias didn't pry. He didn't ask about her past, her family, or the hunger that gnawed at her belly. He just drove, his hands calloused on the reins, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The sun beat down, relentless, baking the dust into a fine powder that rose with every turn of the wheel. Clara huddled in the corner of the wagon bed, her small bundle of possessions clutched tight against her chest. She watched him, trying to decipher the contours of his face, the set of his jaw. Was this kindness a trick? Was it simply a new form of labor? A better-dressed cage? The uncertainty was a heavy cloak, wrapping itself around her, making every breath a shallow thing. She'd known only the harshness of the world, the sharp edges of need. This quiet, unexpected gentleness was a foreign language she didn't understand, a trap she was sure to fall into. Her mind raced, searching for the hidden price, the true cost of this sudden, strange generosity. She'd learned early that nothing was free, especially not for someone like her. Her fingers traced the rough fabric of her skirt, a habit formed from years of nervous anticipation. The ranch was isolated, nestled deep in a valley where the land rolled like waves towards the distant, hazy mountains. A small, weathered farmhouse, a barn, and a few corrals made up Elias Vance's world. It was quiet, a different kind of quiet, from the suffocating silence of her own despair. This quiet hummed with the sounds of insects, the rustle of dry grass in the wind, the lowing of cattle in the distance. Elias led her inside, the air cool and dim. A simple meal of stew and fresh-baked bread sat on the table. "Eat," he said, and for the first time, she felt her stomach truly ache, not from chronic emptiness, but from the sudden, overwhelming prospect of nourishment. He gave her a small room, barely more than a closet, but it had a clean cot and a thick wool blanket. He made no demands, offered no instructions beyond showing her where to find water and the outhouse. He didn't look at her with pity, nor with the harsh expectation she was used to. He simply moved with a quiet purpose, tending to his chores. Clara watched him from the shadows, her small hands clasped tight behind her back. She expected chores, endless, back-breaking work, but he only spoke of rest, of food. It was disorienting. The kindness was unnerving, like a wolf offering a lamb a warm bed. Her body ached, a testament to the life she'd endured, and for the first time, she allowed herself to simply sit, to exist without the constant, gnawing pressure of survival. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, and for a fleeting moment, Clara felt a strange, tentative sense of safety bloom in her chest. It was a fragile blossom, easily crushed, but it was there, nonetheless. Days bled into weeks, each one a slow unraveling of Clara's tightly wound fear. Elias Vance spoke little, but his actions were a constant, quiet hum of care. He taught her how to feed the chickens, how to gather eggs, how to mend a torn fence. He didn't expect her to do it all, not immediately. He demonstrated patiently, then let her try, correcting gently when she faltered. One afternoon, as she helped him patch a hole in the barn roof, she found herself humming a Comanche lullaby her mother had taught her. She stopped abruptly, fearing his reaction, but Elias merely paused, listening, his expression unreadable. "That's a pretty tune," he said, his voice softer than usual. He didn't ask where it came from, or why she knew it. He just acknowledged it, a small act of validation that chipped away at the shame she carried. She began to draw small, intricate patterns on scraps of paper with a burnt stick, hidden beneath her cot. One evening, Elias found one, a detailed drawing of a hawk soaring over a canyon. He didn't scold her for wasting paper, or for drawing when there was work to be done. Instead, he simply picked it up, studied it, and then placed it gently back, leaving a single, unbroken piece of charcoal beside it. That night, for the first time in years, Clara felt a whisper of warmth unfurl within her, a tiny tendril of trust reaching out in the vast, empty space of her heart. She was learning to trust, not with words, but through the consistent quiet of his presence. The ranch began to feel less like a temporary refuge and more like a home, a place where the weight of her past didn't press down quite so heavily. Elias didn't ask her to speak of her pain, but he created a space where she could begin to heal. She no longer flinched when he moved suddenly, no longer braced herself for a harsh word or a dismissive glance. His presence was a steady, grounding force, like the ancient oak tree by the creek, unmoving against the changing seasons. She found herself watching him, learning his rhythms, anticipating his needs without being asked. She would bring him water as he worked in the fields, or set out his supper before he came in. It was a small dance of mutual care, a silent language of belonging. He would sometimes share stories of his own childhood, of growing up on this very land, of the harsh winters and the bountiful summers. He spoke of loneliness, of loss, of the quiet strength it took to keep a ranch alive through droughts and storms. Clara listened, understanding that his words were not just stories, but threads, weaving a connection between them. She started to understand that her being there wasn't a burden to him, but something he had chosen, something he nurtured. The knowledge settled within her, a quiet comfort. She felt a nascent sense of family, not of blood, but of shared existence, of a silent pact forged in the solitude of the plains. She was not just a girl Elias had bought. She was becoming someone who mattered. The quiet peace of the ranch, however, was a fragile thing, easily shattered by the harsh realities of the outside world. Rumors, like wildfire, began to spread through the small, dusty town several miles away. Whispers of a white man buying a Comanche girl from child labor, of dark intentions, of scandalous arrangements, reached Elias's ears, carried by the infrequent visitors who came to trade or gather supplies. Mrs. Henderson, a woman whose piety was matched only by her capacity for judgment, rode out to the ranch one sweltering afternoon, her face a rigid mask of disapproval. Clara, sweeping the porch, heard the clipped, accusing tones before the buggy even stopped. "Brother Vance, Mrs. Henderson began, her voice dripping with false concern. "Folks are talking about this arrangement. It ain't seemly. A man of your standing keeping a girl who ain't family. What might people think?" The words were veiled threats, painting Clara's presence as a sin, a stain on Elias's character and, by extension, on her own. Clara felt the familiar shame rise, scalding hot, across her cheeks. She was an unwanted child again, a source of scandal, her very existence a cause for public shaming. She wanted to shrink away, to disappear, to become invisible. Her small hands clenched the broom handle, knuckles white. The fear of being taken away, of losing this fragile sanctuary, was a cold knot in her stomach. It felt like her deepest desperation was being mistaken for weakness, her silent suffering interpreted as something illicit. Elias, standing tall in the doorway, met Mrs. Henderson's gaze without flinching. His voice, usually soft, held an edge of quiet authority. "Mrs. Henderson," he said, his words slow and deliberate, "Clara is safe here. She chose to come with me, and she chooses to stay." Mrs. Henderson scoffed, her eyes raking over Clara's small form. "A child can't make such choices, Brother Vance. Not one like her. The law might have a thing or two to say about this." The implicit threat of the sheriff, of legal intervention, hung heavy in the air. Clara felt a tremor run through her. The world outside the ranch was closing in, threatening to snatch away the tentative belonging she had found. She remembered the cold indifference of the authorities, the way they had looked through her, not at her. The thought of being dragged back to some institution, some other form of forced labor, was a terror she couldn't bear. Elias saw the fear in her eyes, a reflection of the deep-seated trauma that still clung to her. He stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder, a small, subtle gesture of protection. "This is my home, Mrs. Henderson," he stated, his voice firm. "And Clara is part of it now. I reckon the law will find that I'm doing right by her." Mrs. Henderson, her face tight with disapproval, could do little more than huff and turn her buggy, leaving a lingering scent of judgment and fear in her wake. The encounter left Clara shaken. The illusion of safety fractured, but it also solidified something profound: Elias's unwavering loyalty. The threat of Mrs. Henderson's meddling hung in the air for days, a storm cloud on the horizon. Elias didn't speak of it, but Clara felt the quiet tension in him, the readiness to defend her. One afternoon, a dust cloud appeared on the distant road, growing steadily larger. It was the sheriff's buggy. Clara's breath caught in her throat, her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. This was it. She would be taken, sent back to where she came from, or worse, to some distant orphanage where her spirit would surely wither. She felt a familiar wave of helplessness wash over her, a crushing weight that left her breathless. Elias stepped out onto the porch, his face grim, but his eyes held a steely resolve. The sheriff, a broad-shouldered man with a weathered face, dismounted slowly, his gaze sweeping over Clara. "Heard some talk, Vance," the sheriff drawled, his voice flat. "Folks saying you got yourself a Comanche girl out here. Bought her. Seems a bit irregular." Elias looked directly at Clara, his gaze asking a silent question. This was her choice. Her voice, usually a whisper, was surprisingly steady as she spoke. The words scraped from a deep well of desperate courage. "I chose to come here, sir," she said, her eyes meeting the sheriff's, defying the shame she'd been taught to feel. "Mr. Vance has been kind. He has given me a home." Her words hung in the air, a testament to her newfound strength, her fierce desire to stay. The sheriff's gaze softened, just a fraction. He saw not a helpless victim, but a child standing with unexpected dignity. He looked from Clara to Elias, then back again. "Is that so, girl?" he asked, his voice less accusatory. "Yes, sir," Clara affirmed, her chin lifting slightly. "This is my home now." Elias remained silent, allowing her words to carry the weight of their truth. The sheriff, seeing the quiet affirmation of their bond, the genuine care in Elias's eyes, and the brave choice of the girl, eventually nodded, a flicker of understanding crossing his face. "Well, Vance," he said, turning to Elias, "as long as the girl says she's here willingly, and you're providing for her, I reckon that's all that matters. Just keep folks from talking, eh?" He climbed back into his buggy, leaving behind a profound sense of relief. A heavy weight lifted from Clara's shoulders. The confrontation had been terrifying, but it had also been a crucible. It had tested their loyalty, and they had both emerged, not unscathed, but affirmed. Clara, for the first time, felt truly seen, her voice heard, her choice respected. Elias, in turn, knew with absolute certainty that his quiet endeavor was right. Their bond, forged in silence and tempered by external threat, was stronger than ever. The ranch, once a refuge, was now undeniably home. The departure of the sheriff, and the subsequent quiet dignity with which Elias and Clara carried themselves, seemed to quell the town's rumors, at least for a time. The world outside continued its turning, but within the confines of the ranch, a profound peace began to settle. Elias continued to teach Clara the ways of the land, of animals, of survival. He taught her to ride, her small frame becoming surprisingly adept in the saddle, her movements flowing with the horse's gait. He taught her to read, painstakingly sounding out words from an old, worn Bible, his large finger tracing the lines. Clara devoured the knowledge, her mind a sponge, thirsty for understanding. She absorbed the stories, the words, the beauty of the language, realizing that knowledge was a kind of freedom. She no longer felt like a burden, but a vital part of the ranch, of Elias's life. She carried her scars, both visible and unseen, but they no longer defined her. They were a part of her story, a testament to what she had endured, and to the healing she had found. She began to draw again, not just on scraps of paper, but on the smooth surfaces of river stones, depicting the quiet beauty of the ranch, the soaring hawks, the powerful horses, and the steadfast, solitary man who had given her a new beginning. Years passed, marked by the changing seasons, the cycles of planting and harvest, of birth and growth on the ranch. Clara grew into a young woman, her spirit brightened by Elias's unwavering kindness. She was no longer just the Comanche girl Elias had bought. She was Clara Vance, a woman of the land, of quiet strength and deep compassion. The memories of her past, the sharp pangs of abandonment, still surface sometimes, like shadows across the open plains, but they no longer held her captive. She understood that healing was a journey, not a destination, and that the scars remained, not as wounds, but as reminders of resilience. Elias, now older, his hair streaked with silver, watched her with a quiet pride. He had given her a life, and in return, she had filled his solitary world with a warmth he hadn't known was missing. The ranch, once a place of quiet solitude, was now a home brimming with the unspoken language of affection and shared purpose. There were no grand pronouncements, no dramatic declarations of love or belonging. Their connection was a quiet affirmation, a daily reaffirmation, built on trust, safety, and choice. The haunting hope that had flickered in Clara's darkest moments had found its grounding here, on the dusty, sun-baked earth of the ranch, in the silent, enduring kindness of a man who had seen not a commodity, but a spirit longing to be free, longing to be loved, and had offered her the chance to choose.